I wasn't quite prepared for just how strong a feeling or strong a reaction I got from the movie. I think it's a beautifully captured feature.
This is so beautiful and I absolutely love everything about it. I don't think anyone quite does intimacy and feelings in the way that she does, and the two main performances are just so incredible.
Despite everything that's going on in there, there's this strange warmth from the film that kind of radiates from it, and it's got possibly one of my favourite endings I've seen in a long time, and it was actually a real joy to watch it again.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Today I'm joined by Leslie.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, thanks. And Reece.
Hello, how are we doing?
All good. And Helen.
Hi, hope you're all good.
Well, we're going to be talking about Portrait of a Lady on Fire, so hopefully we're all good.
Thank you as always to the mighty people for the mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
At FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello, film fans. Welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Joining us today, we have Reece and Leslie. Over to you, please, Leslie, to tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
I'm a little bit of a Nathan Barley, I guess. Kind of go all over the place.
That is a deep cut, guys. If you recognise that name, then it does place you in a certain space and time.
An age bracket.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially with movies I watch and media I watch, I guess. So I'm a photographer. I write. I podcast for Fatal Attractions, which is...
We've had a few of your people on here before.
Yes, indeed. We do, which we talk about erotic thrillers and what we love about them and hate about them. I'm also on a hiatus podcasts at the moment called Hustlers of Culture, where we talk about film and media from a kind of ethnic perspective. Don't know when that's coming back yet, but both of them are very interesting podcasts to be on from very different places, talking about very different films. But yeah, I've written as well. I've written for Little White Lies, Empire. I currently write for The Playlist and Set the Tape. Probably a few other places as well.
When you say what you hate about erotic movies, what does that mean? What do you hate about erotic films?
You've got to watch some of the movies to see what you hate about them.
So it's not the genre; it's a specific film in itself that you might take against it.
There's elements of the genre that is just a lot of it hasn't aged as well, considering where we are now. So you're looking at films in the 80s and 90s, and it's been very interesting. We're 91 episodes in now, and it's been very interesting. So many times we've had names of people, Harvey Weinstein, Woody Allen, certain people where you're like, oh, this is interesting to talk about now in this current stage. So that's kind of what you kind of dislike about them. There's some very dated views, very strange things in terms of gender and whatnot going in some of these films. You've had Amelie on before, I think, and she'll happily tell you what she hates about everything. But yeah, I think we'll actually talk about Amelie later on in this episode, won't we? She's given us a response, which she responded to. But let's head over to the chap who's directly above me on my screen as I can see him. Reece, please introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, my name's Reece. I also go by the name Rio, which is just a nickname I've had since childhood. I run a YouTube channel where we focus on films I rate 4 stars and above, new releases, a few top 10 lists and stuff like that. I also write for a website called the Cinematic, and I'm due to be starting a podcast in January.
Oh, wow. You're joining the podcast clutch of people, the herd of podcasters.
Yes, I am very much trying to get some training in at the moment, so it's good of you guys to have me on here.
Well, these are your training wheels. Hope you enjoy using us as much as you want to. Why the cutoff with 4 stars?
Well, I started the channel a couple of years ago, and it seemed to be a case of just a lot of the videos that were getting high views were just me slating films. And that wasn't originally why I kind of started the channel. And it's not a monetary thing, it's more enjoyment. So I just decided to focus on stuff that I enjoy watching more than the negative stuff, because it just rolls on. The all negative comments and stuff, it just gets a little bit too much.
For a bit of insider baseball here, when guests are coming on and picking films, one of the lines I do say is like, try and make it a half decent film, because it is kind of tough. It's not so interesting for us, or I don't think for listeners, when it's just 4 people saying this film's rubbish, and then everyone's just like, well, why did you choose it then? What I do like is when people, like, half the people like a film and half the people don't like a film. But yeah, I can agree with you a lot there, Reece, in terms of why waste your time watching, listening, reading things that just aren't of interest to you, and then talking about them more.
Yeah, obviously the writing on the website, I'll review anything I go see, so I'll write about anything. It doesn't bother me if it's good or bad, but it's a bit easier to do it in write form rather than video form, when you're kind of just slating something, and it's not fun constantly repeating yourself when you're getting the video wrong about how much you hate a film, right?
We've never hated any films at all on here ever. Maybe a few.
Yes, there's been a few low scores. Has that been due to one of us, or is it typically a guest that's taken against stuff, Helen?
Probably me, isn't it? We took all the ones. I don't like this film. I think it's the scoring balances everything out normally in the end, doesn't it? Even if one person really doesn't like it, then the positivity from everyone else makes sure that it
tends to buoy it.
It gets some points.
Well, we're talking today, Reece, about the film you chose, which is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Can you tell us first of all why you chose it, and then I'll get my timer up and we'll give you 60 seconds or less for the synopsis.
No problem. The reason I chose it is it's one of my favourite films, and the fact that it's on a streaming service is just a joy. Anyone that can go out and see it that's not aware of the film, any people I can put onto it that are not aware of it, which you should be aware of it if you're into films. It's just a blast of a film.
Hold on a second, I'll get the timer. Timer starts now.
Okay, so it is a love story set in the 18th century in France. It's all about Marianne, a young painter who is tasked with painting a wedding portrait of a young aristocrat. The only problem is she has to do it without her knowing, so she has to study her throughout the days and paint the portrait in secret.
Lovely.
Very nice.
25 seconds in. This was one of the people's, I just took on a couple of points you said there before we go into handing over to Leslie and Helen. This is features in many people's top 10, if not towards the top of the films of the year when it came out. And also, one thing you said about it coming on a streaming service, I think it's been on Mubi for a while, but that's slightly less accessible to people. So for it to come onto Netflix is definitely a coup, and it's definitely a good opportunity. And this is the first time I've seen it. I've got Mubi, and I still just one of those things where it's like an extra step to watch it. So yeah, thank you for choosing it. Leslie, Helen, have you seen this before? What are your initial thoughts?
I have seen it before. My initial thoughts were the film destroyed me last time I watched it. I wasn't quite prepared for just how strong a feeling or strong a reaction I got from the movie. Be it a romance or otherwise. I think it's a beautifully kind of captured feature, and it's just got this, there's an element, despite everything that's going on in there, there's this strange warmth from the film that kind of radiates from it all over, and it's got possibly one of my favourite endings I've seen in a long time, and it was actually a really joy to watch it again this time over. I just seem to get a lot out of the movie. Those two, that relationship is so tense and just full of feeling and thoughts that aren't said, and there's something really emotional and passionate about watching what happens on screen.
Had you seen it before, Helen, on Mubi? This is another streaming service that is available to people, but obviously stick on Netflix. Had you seen it before on Mubi or in the cinema or other places, Helen?
Sadly, not in the cinema. I would have loved to have seen it in the cinema, but I saw this kind of like, it was probably my favourite lockdown film viewing. So yeah, I saw it when it was on Mubi and pretty much recommended it to everyone and got everyone to sign up to Mubi using my special codes from it. I'm a huge fan of Céline Sciamma's films, and I just think this is so beautiful, and I absolutely love everything about it. I don't think anyone quite does sort of intimacy and feelings in the way that she does, and the two main performances are just so incredible, and there's just so much that you've already both said that I completely agree with, and it's such a moving experience that it's great. It's on Netflix, which means more people can now see it, and hopefully you'll be listening to this and thinking, oh, I haven't seen it. It's French, but it's got subtitles, but I might be tempted to give it a go just from what we've said already, hopefully.
I did check to see if you could actually have an English dub version of it, and there was no option. It
Good.
was either French with subtitles or not.
I'm happy about that.
When to talk about a TV show, Squid Game came on, and there's an option to dub it from the Korean into the English, and that was the most atrocious thing I've ever witnessed. When it defaulted to the English overdub, I thought something was wrong with me.
Yeah, it's not fun at all. I watched Dark, the German program in all German, which was beautiful, lovely program. I thought I'm going to be trying the subbed version, the English version. Awful, worst 5 minutes of my life.
We do talk about flipping flopping between Studio Ghibli and that being an interesting prospect depending on the film. But yeah, I mean, look, watch it in an original language. You get the intonation more, you get the vibe more. And if you can't deal with that 1 inch barrier, as director Bong said for Parasite, which, good Lord, if Parasite ever comes on Netflix in the UK, someone better choose that bad boy. But it seems everyone here is a fan of foreign language films. It's not a problem for us. But I think sometimes that is a roadblock for people to get involved in, isn't it? So, Reece, at what point do you know it was an LGBT love story? Did you know the story before you came into watching the film, or was it just a surprise to you?
No, it's just one of those 2019 films that people were talking about. I love Céline Sciamma's work, all her previous films. So going into it, I didn't know anything about the story at all. I don't watch trailers. I just look at cast lists and directors, and that's how I choose which films I'm going to watch based on my own personal time. If it's a screening invite, I'll pretty much go and watch anything. But with this one, I didn't really know anything about the story at all. It was very fresh to me.
You said Céline Sciamma, so I haven't seen any of her films beforehand, but I've been very, very aware of Girlhood, and just the fact I've not been able to grab it. And it looks, everything I see about the film, I'm like, yeah, I want to watch that. And it kind of leans back to the availability and the ease of access sometimes. Tell us about Céline. What does she bring to the table that others perhaps don't? Helen, you talked a bit about intimacy that she portrays on screen.
Yeah, what Helen said was 100% right. I feel like she just gets human emotions. With Portrait, for instance, I don't relate to anything that's going on screen. Them characters are just completely the opposite to what I am, but you feel such an emotional connection to them. And she seems to have very grounded human stories. She seems to understand what makes humans tick. And every single film she's had, they're all completely different films, but they're all very much grounded human stories. And the fact that she writes and directs her own stuff means that her films have a certain type of feel. I feel like with filmmakers that write and direct, they do have their own kind of style. And Céline definitely has her own style for sure.
Her performances that she gets out of children as well are just incredible. Petite Maman last year and Tomboy as well, and the cast, the slightly older girls in Girlhood. But like you said, they're all completely different films, but they're all quite emotionally devastating in their own special way, but filled with incredibly beautiful moments. So you can kind of like have your heart broken, but at the same time be surrounded by kind of love and beautiful moments. So it's, yeah, I'd recommend them all. I don't know if I'd pick one particular one. I would just say try and watch them all if you can.
Yeah, definitely. I think Petite Maman, sorry to cut you in, Petite Maman, probably the shortest of her films, the most recent one. That's probably the easiest one to get into. I think anyone can relate to the story that is told there. But yeah, no, overall, I think what she said in relation to the characters and the young actors, she can get some unreal performances out of first-time actors, people that have never been on screen before. So that's really a joy to see, for sure.
We've had a few LGBT stories here. I'm not sure when this one will come out, but we've had Call Me By Your Name, Ammonite, God's Own Country. And one thing that Helen and I talk about when those films come on is that often the versus a straight, so blue is the warmest colour. There seems to be fewer kind of rom-coms for LGBT and straight stories tend to be on the rom-com side rather than the more kind of serious drama side of things, with the exception being the Before trilogy. What do you guys make of that? Is that a fair statement? Do you think there's something to that?
There is and there isn't. I think it's one of those things where I feel that the biggest pull about LGBT movies for me is the fact that there's a dynamic there that I don't think has been mined enough for more mainstream audiences. There's still kind of a stigma around such romances on screen that you can really capture something here that seems almost not unique, but just different in the dynamic of it all. I mean, I'm looking at this and it reminds me of films like, obviously we had Moonlight, which won the Oscar. You have Happy Together from 1997, which was very hard to find by Wong Kar-wai until it came out on Criterion this year, or maybe last year. There is an element of that of LGBT films that you are able to find and watch, and Netflix even had some of their own as well. I can't remember what the name of one was called that I watched. I did watch it and review it, but it wasn't particularly great. I mean, it's there, but unfortunately, I think with so much of this stuff, I always feel that it's distribution. There's always this element of someone turning around going, "Oh, I don't think anyone will go for that because it's not a straight romance." When actually, as we've seen from just only a couple of years ago, they can win awards, they can win the Oscars, they can make money. And I think we're in an interesting place now in order to do that. So I think it is there, and I think it is just a matter of finding the right way of distributing them. I mean, when Bros came out earlier this year, people were quite frustrated that everyone seemed to have forgotten The Birdcage, the Robin Williams movie.
Which we've had on here as well.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things on where, like, it is there, but I think for some reason every 10 years we seem to forget everything that's happened previously. I don't know what that is, but I think there's a strength in the dynamic that can make stories quite interesting, especially from a societal point of view.
I think it's quite often a piece with LGBT stories historically that it ends in tragedy, and that's not the recent crop we've seen. Is that there seems to be a lighter, brighter side to these stories, even if they don't end up in the end of this film. They don't end up together. It's not one of them is carted off to an asylum and or killed and or something worse. It's just the course of the relationship has run its course rather than anything more. Anything darker. I don't know, Reece, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I just think it's a case of one of these films blowing up, the same way Parasite done in 2019 for foreign language movies, and how we've progressed with how they're getting released and what we're seeing on the different streaming sites and cinemas. I think when an LGBT movie kind of hits that kind of levels, it's going to completely blow up. Times have definitely changed over the last kind of like 5 years to what it was. We're seeing a lot more of these type of films being released, but it's just a case of one of them having that kind of mainstream appeal. Bros is a quality movie, but it just didn't do well enough at cinemas. But if we keep getting more of those, they keep getting good reviews, then hopefully in the future we'll see more and more.
Any thoughts, Helen, before we head over to the scores?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people will genuinely seek out a great film with a good story that has something that they connect with, and not necessarily just because it kind of reflects their lifestyle or specifically for that kind of romance. So I think it is a studio thing, and that they're always kind of saying, oh, there isn't an audience for this. But it's like, well, there is. It's just like, if you don't put out good films that people are going to want to see and tell their friends and go out and see the cinema, then they're not going to make any money to go, well, this one made money, let's make some more, or this one reached an audience. So it's just one of those things that people will enjoy great films. You've just got to get them out there to begin with. So I guess with things like Mubi, you've got more kind of options. They're sort of getting more mainstream releases. Just look at something like Decision to Leave. So having that kind of backing behind it, you know, can only help. But I think if the story's great and the performances are great, then people are going to go and see it. I think tastes have changed a lot more. I did want to, I mean, there's so much more I could talk about, but I think...
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
A couple of the films that we've had on recently, I wasn't quite sure whether I bought the relationship between them and whether I thought the chemistry worked. But in the case of this, absolutely. And there's so much that isn't said, but it's mostly through facial expressions, particularly Héloïse Adèle, is it Haenel? How do you pronounce her last name? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Adèle Haenel, I think it is.
Her face, her grumpy kind of angry face at the start, she's just so angry and nothing can kind of break through, and she just eventually becomes like more softer, and when she smiles and when she eventually starts to laugh, it's just an incredible performance where not really much has happened, nothing's really been said, and it's all kind of this very physical face performance. It's not even that much body language either, it's all in the face and eyes. I just think it's really beautiful performance from both of them. Well, there's a sort of third female as well, but those two in particular were outstanding.
Well, there's that scene where they break down each other's facial expressions, isn't there? And they kind of go through and the understanding they have of each other as people, and they kind of both don't realise how much they've been paying attention to the other one, and that's all clear to see when that moment happens in the film. You get a greater understanding of how good the performances have been from both of them. But no, I agree. I thought the two lead performances were fantastic.
I think there's a piece about, you said, Helen, about not buying the romances, and that's where often these films, straight rom-com or otherwise, they pivot around that point. And this was, the build-up here was quite slow, but then it meant that there's a first kiss, I guess, is the first point that often there's to the audience. There's a clear line of interest. It was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Whereas other films, when there's suddenly a kiss, you're like, where the hell did that come from? That makes no sense. There's no kind of build up to it. There's no kind of earned feeling of it being earned. And one of the bits I liked the most, one of the scenes I liked the most, when they're breaking down at which point they wanted to kiss each other first. And it's like, oh yeah, what do you think about it? Like, oh yeah, I can see why that could have happened. I can see what that would have happened. And I think I've had those discussions with previous girlfriends before, that when did you first fancy me, or when did you first realise? And that kind of scene there, I think, was really nice to have that in the story as well. But I do want to touch on Sophie, because I think she's a larger part to the story than people know about before we go to the scores. And this third character who is super helpful. She's like one of the world's kindest people, but going through this traumatic experience at the same time, but also being supported by the two main characters. I didn't know she existed in the story, and I think she's a great part. Also, Valeria Golino as a mother, that's threw me for a loop.
Yeah, Hot Shots Part Deux.
Yeah, Hot Shots Part Deux, Rain Man. I just thought, what is?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to just bring up, because this is my first of the director's movies, but one of the things I seem to hear from everything, and is clearly shown in this, is she's kind of depicting like this sense of womanhood. I mean, the beautiful moment that kind of leads up to the title of the film, where they all start singing, and they all start singing around in the campfire. That is a extraordinary moment for something so simple. And it's something that you could only really have with Sophie there. And there's that beautiful moment with Sophie where, I don't want to say too much about plot spoilers, but obviously she's going through something quite traumatic. And as she's going through this traumatic thing, there is a baby right next to her. And you've got this really weird kind of contrast and tension between that about what's occurring and what that kind of represents. And I don't want to say too much. It's great for you to watch the film in order to see what happens. But it's just this interest, like so much of the film is this interesting kind of conversation about womanhood and what it seems to be, what it seems to be like for a woman. Sorry to kind of say that when there is a woman here that can actually kind of agree or disagree to what I'm saying.
You're trying to mansplain, Leslie. What's going on here?
Exactly. I'm very worried about that. So, but
it's really interesting you mentioned that, because all the way through, Marianne, she's a painter in her own right, but it's her father's business that she's kind of painting and drawing under, because obviously women weren't allowed to paint. And she mentions at some point that they're not allowed to observe the male nude to make their studies, and she does it in secret. And even at the end, they're at an exhibition, and she presents her painting under the name of her father. So it's very much focused on gender roles at that time. So, I mean, Héloïse is being married off in place of her sister. So it's not even her arranged marriage. It's her sister's arranged marriage that she has to fulfill. So it's very much reinforcing the gender roles, but in kind of a different way, and sort of saying there is something outside of that, or kind of looking at them as they are. So I mean, I think what you've said is fine. I'm not going to...
Anything else, Reece, before we head to the scores?
I just wanted to touch on one other thing. The cinematography in this film is just sublime. Claire Maffon is the cinematographer. She done Spencer, the Pablo Larraín film with Kristen Stewart, and also shot Petite Maman, the last Céline Sciamma film. And I'm trying to find the previous French film she's done, but it's a little bit hard because there's no big names attached. But I just wanted to touch on that, because it's just a beautiful film from start to finish. And then the location scouting as well, everything there is just visually, I just thought it was stunning.
I think the direct contrast with Ammonites, which I can't remember if this is out by the time this episode comes out, but Ammonites, they're both set by the coast. In Ammonite, the coastal line Regis on the rocky pebbly beaches. Here, the coastal line is a lot more forgiving and beautiful, traditional sense. And, I know where I'd rather be. I think the cinematography played its part in both senses, but yeah, the cinematography in Portrait was more to my liking. But let's head to the scores, guys. We can keep on talking on about the film as we go through them.
Hello, I'm Hannah Flint from the First Film Club, a film podcast series dedicated to established and emerging talent, both in front of and behind the camera, and the feature debuts that launched their careers. From the new drama Mass to the cult classic Heathers, each episode is dedicated to a film, a guest, and the behind-the-scenes stories, memories, and advice from their time on set. Find us, the First Film Club, wherever you listen to your stripped media podcasts. Come join the club.
So welcome to the Flixwatcher scores. They're always out of 5. You may have decimal places if you wish. And we will start with you, please, Reece, with your recommendability.
Recommendability, I'll probably give it a 3.5. That's just not because I don't want everyone to watch it. It's just if I'm talking on a grand scale of normal viewers, some people are going to be put off by it being a French love story.
So 3.5.
That's kind of the only reason. Yeah, 3.5. For me, I wish everyone would watch it. But if someone asked me for a film recommendation, one of my friends who watches 5 films a year, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is probably not the film I'd go to. If it's a film fanatic who hasn't seen it, then by all means, I'd put it forward to them.
Leslie?
I would go 3.5 as well. I think the 1-inch barrier that is the subtitle has become worse in the last 20 years, unfortunately. I remember working at a cinema, and there used to be a point in time where seeing more foreign films was quite easy. And now it seems to be even more, it seems to be more difficult. And it's very hard to try and get someone into something like this, which is, it's quite a deliberate pace for a movie. And lots of people want something happening all the time as opposed to letting the film kind of wash over them. But I know that there would be a strong subset of people that I could easily recommend this film to, as I brought him up before. Anyone who's a fan of someone like Wong Kar-wai or anything else like that would gain a lot out of this movie.
3.5. Helen.
God, these scores are breaking my heart.
Helen.
I have to say, I think this is the best film that is available to stream right now. Absolutely. Like,
this is
way above anything else that is on Netflix for sure at the moment. It is killing me not to be able to give it a 5, but I think that it's a French lesbian period drama might put a few people off.
Language, romance, and periods. You're not a period person yourself, are you? If this
I'm not a massive period drama fan, no.
If this was set up as an English language period, would that entice you more? Would that be?
I'd probably, had it not been from the director and that it just from like the stills just looks so beautiful, and just that whole image of like, why is she on fire? Like, what is going on? just that, and then like a couple of the beach shots were enough for me to go, what is this film? I need to see this film. I need to know what's going on. But I mean, I tend to recommend a bit more wild and free than probably most people. So I'm going to give it 4.5. And the 0.5 is that if you don't like subtitles and you're not willing to give French films a go, then maybe don't watch it. But if you're looking for something that is really, really, really beautiful, then this is it.
So what's that score? 4.5?
Yeah.
I'm going to go for 4. I'm quite surprised that Leslie and Reece here, but you have to mitigate for people. I like what you're saying about people who watch like 5 films a year, and it's hard. It's kind of weird that is a lot of people, isn't it? I remember someone asked me once what I did at the weekend, and I was like, I saw like 4 or 5 films in the cinema. And they're like, what? Are you insane? What's the matter with you? It's like, well, there were a lot of good films I wanted to see in the cinema, so what's the matter? And he's like, well, I watch maybe one film every like 6 months in the cinema. I'm like, okay, it just shows the breadth of people. And hey, this wouldn't be a film I'd recommend to people who go to cinema. Well, to be honest, maybe they go to cinema only twice because there's only films of this caliber that they want to see. They don't want to see the Avengers or Star Wars or whatever random comedies on. But yes, I think you need to know your audience before you recommend it. But 4 overall. Repeat viewing score, Reece.
It's a 5 for me. It's come out in 2019. I've seen it probably about 20 times. I watched it twice alone this weekend. If I really like a film, any film which I rate highly, I'll sit down and dissect every single minute detail of it. And this is definitely one which I watch a few times for enjoyment, and then kind of studying the cinematography, like I spoke about previously, is something I'm really into at the moment. I like good looking films, working out why they do certain shots and everything like that. So Portrait of a Lady on Fire is definitely one which has a lot of rewatchability for me for sure.
Wow. Leslie. I don't know why it's left me stunned. Like that's a lot of times to watch it.
It's the second time I've watched this movie, and I was kind of happy to go over it again. When someone picks something for you sometimes and they don't know who you are, you always kind of wonder what they might pick and why. So good on you, Reece. I will give this a 4 in terms of repeat viewing. I think I will say that the pace of the movie means it's good for like a good Sunday night movie, Sunday evening movie. It's not one that I can see myself always going back to. However, it is something I wish I can own so I can show more people.
Helen?
Yes, this is my second time watching it, and I think that was the right amount of time between it. It is a good 2 hours, and it is a slow one. But once you kind of get immersed in that, then there's just sort of so much going on that isn't like major stuff. There's a part at the end where there's a painting of her and she's got her little book and it's turned to the page where she's got her sexy little drawing on and things like that, that you really have to kind of...
28.
Yeah, page 28 for that drawing. It's just those really beautiful moments that I think had I not rewatched it, I would have just not remembered that. So I really enjoyed rewatching it. It didn't really make me want to watch all of her other films again, which I've only seen... This is the only one I've seen twice, so I feel like it's gearing me up for some more rewatching. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 as well for repeat.
Okay. I think this is my first time watching it. I need to watch it again. And I guess although I'm watching the best of circumstances, a bit tired, swapping from TV to iPad to computer screen when I had like a bit of lunch break. So I do want to watch it and give it my full undivided attention in one fell swoop. But yeah, I need to watch it again. So 3.8. Small screen score. Has anyone seen this in the cinema?
No.
All small screen. Okay. Well, Reece, you go first. Small screen score.
Yeah, I've only seen it on a small screen, so it's hard to see how it differs from being in the cinema. If the BFI puts it on, like they put on a lot of these older French films, I will be there for sure. I say older, I mean, just, foreign language is what I meant to say. If they put on these foreign language films from a couple of years ago, then I'll definitely be going to see it. I'd love to see the visuals on screen. I love the film. It's one of my favourite films. It's hard to give it anything but a 5 when I love it as much as I do, and I've only seen it on the small screen. I might change my mind when I see it in the cinema, and there might be a stark comparison between the two. But right now, because of my love for it, I have to give it a 5 as well.
Fair play. Leslie?
4.5. There is something about the colour in the cinematography that is so warm and different, and there's a vibrancy in there that just has you just directs your eyes to it. I think there's some really interesting plays on colour in it that makes it just worth watching on a small screen, let alone a big screen. I think the film is absorbing, and I think the big moments, even though it's a film kind of built up of small moments, are just so arresting. Like I said, the campfire scene and the finale is like unbelievable. I can't imagine what that would have been like on a big screen, because just the use of music and performance and that last shot, and then it leaves you in silence. It's unbelievable. But these days, more people are watching stuff on small screens now. They're watching stuff on TV. So yeah, 4.5.
Helen?
Oh, I would have loved to have seen this at the cinema so much. It's really interesting what you say about the use of music, because there is no score, there is no music apart from the music she plays on the piano, the a cappella song.
Isn't there a bit of score at the end?
Well, the a cappella song, and then the piece of music, which is the music that she plays on the piano. So there's no other music, and the only kind of like sounds are the rustling of the dress and the sea and all of that. So the sound is really incredible in itself, in that there's an absence of what we'd normally expect, and I guess what we'd normally expect from kind of a period type drama as well. You'd expect there to kind of like be pianos and strings and sort of like, here is the big emotional moment, music coming up, and here it is, and here it gets you going. Whereas a lot of the time there's like painting brushstrokes and things. So I think I would really love to see that. But again, I've enjoyed it at home, so I'm going to give it a 4.
I think it'd be really cool to see it in the cinema. And I think just the whole kind of ambience of a foreign language film does envelop you a bit more in cinema. So 3.8, again, engagement score. Reece?
It's a hard one for me. Any film that I like, I don't really turn off films. Even if I dislike films, if it's a TV program, I'll give it an episode or two and then turn it off. Films, sure, I'll normally just ride it out. So I think my answer for any film on this podcast would be a 5.
Fair enough. Leslie?
Engagement, I'd say 5. I wouldn't take this movie off if it was on again. I just wouldn't. I think it's there is something about the way those performances are so in tune with each other that you want to know more. And I would give that 5.
Helen?
Yeah, I thought I could do like a little bit of research on the side while I was like watching it, just to kind of like find out like little bits of trivia and stuff, but you can't. Mainly because if they say anything, you'll miss that. But also, I was just like, why am I doing this? Like, stop. Just like, you don't need to know this trivia. It can wait until the end. So I was kind of like, I've seen it before. I don't need to have like 100%. And I was like, actually, I do. This is like really amazing. So
did you know it was Valeria Golino when you were watching it?
I didn't know. I didn't recognise her. I thought she might have been someone else, but it wasn't her. But I did recognise Sophie from Happening, so I did have to find out who she was, but I didn't recognise. It's been a long time since I saw Hot Shots. So I'm gonna give it. I think it is quite a slow one though, so it's not like one where you have to. If you like blink, you miss something and you have to go backwards. So I'm going to give it 4.5.
I'm going to give it a 4. I think I was tired and bouncing around from place to place, and this kind of feeds into a repeat viewing score where like I need to watch it again because I don't think I did it justice in that viewing. So 4.5 and 4. Go on computer, and that gives us an overall score of 4.25625. Hi, who go? If recent Leslie, you on the recommendability score is lower than I thought it was going to be, but fair enough. But 4.25625 is very decent. Should we head to Twitter, guys? Everybody who's listening to us, do follow us on Twitter. We're still on Twitter at the moment. I don't know. There's discourse as to whether people pivot to a different place. Anyway, we're currently on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod, and do follow us because we do talk about films in general, films on Netflix, and also before we go for recording, we put out a tweet like this. We're reviewing Portrait of a Lady on Fire with Afro Film Viewer, that's Leslie, and from Fatal Track Pod, and Rio, how would you say that? Rio's positive POV. Have you seen it? Tell us your thoughts and your score out of 5 stars for a shout out on Flixwatcher. And we had a fairly lively discussion and a few responses here. Quite a few people we know. Reece, have you got the tweets in front of you?
I'll go for the 5-star one. I don't know what the actual at is, but 5 stars. Film left me stunned. Had to take months to sort out why. It was a visual and emotional sensory overload, which I fully understand. Never felt so engaged and seen a film before or since like it.
That was from BD Jojo Negoro. Couldn't understand. Wait, do you want to try that one? Leslie, do you want to pick one?
Yeah, I'm going to be a bit selfish. I'll pick Amelie, the only Cleo Luna, because it's the one I reacted to. I've seen parts of it as I fell asleep after about 20 minutes and missed about half an hour. I know everyone loves it, but personally I struggle with Sciamma's slow storytelling, where I feel not much is happening, or at least touching me. I'll give it another try though. I don't know what to say to that, so I'm gonna.
Well, you weren't happy.
Shocking.
It's just that. Oh wow! Oh wow!
Yeah, just.
Never be sorry you're a Philistine. If you expand
next time I see her, I'll have a word.
If you expand the thread, guys who are listening, go to the thread. Just type in Flixwatcher and Portrait, and it'll pop up. But they're the two co-hosts on the same podcast who were not at. They didn't agree with each other. Let's just say, Helen.
So this is previous guest Barbara Mendes-George. Watched it at the cinema and left transformed. Engrossing, gorgeous, moving, 5 stars. Very jealous. You got to see it at the cinema.
Reece, there's a couple more left, I think.
Slow burn, pun intended, but the viewer is vastly rewarded once you've reached a quietly devastating and deeply emotional coda. 4 stars, and that's from Liam H. Dempsey.
And there's one last one, I think. Leslie?
Yeah, from David Trumbull on Drumble is his handle there. It says, truly the most devastating cinematic love affair I've ever experienced. I felt like I had lived an entire lifetime within the space of their brief, beautiful relationship. The cinematography, writing and direction, and the 2 lead turns are so crushingly truthful. 5 stars.
Truth bombs there.
Leslie, Reece, thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell everyone, just briefly remind them where we can find you online, and then say goodbye to the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So anywhere, if you Google Afro Film Viewer, I'll come up in some form, either on Instagram or on Twitter. You can find me at Fatal Attractions, which is Fatal Attractions Pod on Twitter, or Culture Hustlers, which is also on Twitter, Hustlers of Culture, my other podcast, wherever good podcasts are found.
And yourself, Reece?
Yeah. So my is Rio's Positive POV. That's REOS Positive POV. Take you to my Twitter account, and there's a Linktree link there, which brings you to the website I write for. IMDb profile, that kind of stuff is on there. So head over there and you can find out everything that I do in relation to film.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Say goodbye to the listeners.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye.
Bye. Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.